We have two masters here, and I will chime in as well. So, Lynn, that was a wonderful presentation, and Mark, those buns look wonderful.
Thank you.
And so, folks watching, let's ask in some questions.
Add them in the last 1 to 2 minutes of mixing. Some people who, if you have the processing system where you remix, you could do them after the first bulk fermentation. But I find it's just easiest to put them into the dough towards the end of the mixing. You don't want to put them in too early, as they will break up too much. And the other thing is that these onions, to get the crispiness and the beautiful golden flavor, they are fried. And so as a result, they have a fair amount of fat in them as well. And so if you put them in too early, that fat can potentially mix out into the dough and, in a sense, make your dough too rich, right, so to speak. So in terms of managing it all, putting it in at the end, the last 1-2 minutes of mixing, it's just enough to get it incorporated and distributed is all you need to do. Well, that's 3 different things.
Actually, Mark, surprisingly, they actually show up all at once. They do, right, Gideon?
Yeah,
yes.
But usually they're 3 different causes most of the time, right?
Oh, no. That's if it shows up all at once, it's everything to do with your dough temperature and your oxidation system.
Yeah, old.
True, yes.
We call it old dough.
Yes.
And so it's oxidized too quickly, or it's too hot coming out of the mixer. And so controlling that dough temperature coming out of the mixer, and also calling your friendly neighborhood tech to come out and look at your formula to see if it's balanced with the oxidation and all the other dough conditioners that are involved. But more than likely it has to do with that. Sometimes, yes, blisters and wrinkling can be paired with humidity, both in the proof box and the oven. But if all 3 of them are happening, yeah, most likely with the dough temp and oxidation.
If it's only the white spots, it's usually oxidation, and that's usually too much ascorbic acid.
Yeah.
Yes, and I've definitely seen this issue in a lot of the plants. Actually, no hamburger line out there is spared this issue. And especially during the summer months, and especially if you have an inexperienced dough operator out there mixing the doughs, right? They don't watch dough temperature. They don't know the strength of their flour. They don't know what to dose the dough conditioners at. So these 3 key elements are so important. This is the reason why you train your mixer operator. Oh, by the way, we have a Baker certified course to teach you how to mix and flour quality that you have to watch, right? So I am pretty sure when I say that most dough operators don't know why they use dough conditioners, and that dough conditioners are an option to go up or down to manipulate the flour quality, right? So with that lack of knowledge right there, together with uncontrollable dough temperatures, you are going to get whites on top of your bread, okay? So to control the whites, train your dough operator to understand dough conditioner manipulation and flour quality, okay? Those 2 need to go hand in hand. Reduce your dough temperature means if you're going to upgrade your mixer, make sure it's jacketed. Okay. Use tempered water. Keep your flour away from the hot sun. Okay. Keep a control of your dough temperature. Let me tell you why this is so important. Because if anybody else comes into your plant and solve this issue, you're going to actually use more oxidizers and use more dough conditioners just to try to control that problem, that issue. Okay. So I don't want you to go there. I want you to take a control of your dough temperature, and you will actually see a reduction in those blisters and white spots. Not only that, you're going to save a lot of money. And one last comment on that is, when it comes to summer and dough temperatures and trying to crank up the cuts per minute as much as possible, you're going to have a hard time keeping up with the dough in the trough. Okay, so what a lot of bakers do is they go up on dough size. I mean, that's totally wrong. Don't go up on dough size, go down on dough size, right? Because the longer your dough stays in the dough trough, you're going to get more oxidation, you're going to get more yeast, more yeast activity. So you're going to see a huge difference between the beginning of the dough and the end of the dough. Okay. And this difference is usually seen by nice smooth crowns at the beginning of dough and wrinkly crowns with white spots and blisters at the end of the dough. Okay. So don't go up on batch size, go down on batch size. Okay. That's all the comments I have for that particular problem.
Depends a lot on your dough process, but I mean, and the formula. It can be anywhere from 45 minutes to an hour and a half. And that is a lot of it's formula dependent. The richer the dough, the longer your fermentation is going to be. It's just in terms of, because of the osmotic pressure on the yeast, it just slows it down unless you have special yeast. Buns, typically, I mean, in a retail setting, you want to go for 90% humidity, 90 degrees Fahrenheit. You just want to try and stay below 110, because once you get up to around 100 degrees, it slows the fermentation down. It doesn't go faster, it actually gets slower. And once you get to 140, the yeast is dead. Unlike things like croissants and other laminated doughs, there the issue is preventing the lamination fat from melting too much. So you go with a lower proofing temperature and a lower humidity and a longer proofing time, or like with yeast donuts, because you don't want water in the fryer, they proof very dry, that type of thing. But buns, you can, a little wetter is better sometimes.
Yep, I agree. My only question to that, which probably don't have time, is, the common fermentation time, are you talking about like a sponge and dough, like fermentation, or like fermentation of the sponge, or were you talking about the proof box? We answered the proof box. I
was referring to the proofing.
Yeah, we answered the proof box part of that, but about 4 hours is a good like sponge ferment time.
Yeah, especially because of the richer doughs. Hamburger buns are a fair bit richer. If it was something a little more on the leaner side, you could get away with an hour. But the longer sponge also helps improve your shelf life and texture as well.
Yep.
Ideal would be 0.
Yeah, I was about to say goose egg.
Yeah, guys, that's not realistic.
Yeah, but all kidding aside, typical, the most common is probably around the 10% range, right?
10 to 12, yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, if you're at 8%, you're probably going to have issues. It probably means it's either not baked through enough, or you're going to have other problems related to moisture in terms of quick mold growth and things like that. But usually it's around 10 to 12%.
That is right. And if you use a thermal profile to target 80% of arrival, you are always going to hit the moisture loss target. So. The lower, the better.
You know, when I was teaching in community college, the way I would put it is, you know, if you go to the beach on a hot sunny day and, you know, it's 110 degrees outside and you're wearing jeans and everything else, you're not very comfortable. Whereas at around 68 to 75, you're going to be comfortable. So that's, you know, the yeast is a living organism. So it's happy in that temperature range. And, you know, as talked about, Gideon, maybe, you know, you could speak to this, is that, you know, again, in summertime, if you can get your dough temperature down, then you don't have to worry about speeding up your cuts as much. It's another way of controlling it, right? If you can keep it down to 68 or something like that.
I have seen dough being processed at 110.
Whoa.
Yes. Well,
I know. That's awful. And that's when you see a lot of that issue rise, you know, the white wrinkling spots and stuff like that.
On the contrary, it's March 31st and it's sleeting outside. And so if it's cold, you might want to reach, you know, 76, 78. Top would be like 80.
Yeah.
Like I would not go above 80. No. Life happens, baking happens, and yeah, it might get kicked out at 83, 85. Just adjust your water temperature and your mixing time and make it flow. So there's so many variables, as all of us know, but like we've said, my ideal is 70 to 75.
Absolutely. The lower, the better. Yeah, that is such a hard target to reach for a lot of plants.
You know, like I've had the opportunity to do some work in Puerto Rico and Jamaica, or if you're like in India and monsoon season and things like that, getting the dough temperature down is very, very challenging, because you're not in an air-conditioned room or anything like that. And if the flour is held in a bulk silo, you've got flour going into the mixer at 100 degrees or more.
Yeah.
So the thing is that a lot of bakers want to add ice, and there's a lot of ice charts that are out there. The problem is that as that ice melts, that is only when it gets a chance to get into the gluten. So you're never going to get decent equal gluten development or mixing. So getting water temperature down as cool as you can. And if you're dealing with these types of environments, and if you do have refrigeration or freezer space available, take some of the flour out of the silo and put it into the
I was just going to suggest that.
So that you can calculate that. You can use the basic baker's calculation. You just add another factor, being that cold flour, and then you'll be able to balance it out with the water, right? And so that you might even find yourself actually putting 50-degree water in to try and get to the right temperature, right?
Yeah.
So it's you know, because I've been in bakeries in Puerto Rico and Jamaica, especially, where they even had water coolers, and we were cooling the water down to 38 degrees. Didn't do it because we had to put the flour in the fridge the day before. It was the only way, right? And,
yes, that's the only way.
Then all of a sudden, it had beautiful bread. It was like, you know, it was like a miracle to them, right?
And this is the reason why I ask a lot of bakers who are building plants, especially in desert, to put them indoors, to put the silos indoors or under covers, right? Mm-hmm. That will save you a ton of money.
If you're in the northern hemisphere, put it on the north side. If you're in the southern hemisphere, put it on the south side of the baker.
Correct. Yeah.
And believe it or not, painting them white even helps too.
Yeah.
Yes. Absolutely.
Have fun hiring someone who will paint them, but
You have to give it some retrogradation. And to get that, it means cooling for a long time. Unfortunately, with gluten-free systems, that's what you need to do. It's not possible to slice gluten-free fresh. Like, I've not seen that done. Okay. And there's no amount of processing aids that you could put in there to make that happen. So you just have to cool the buns.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah, you just have to cool the buns down, and sometimes it takes a day.
It's just when they're fresh, when they're slicing.
Yeah, it's not possible to slice when they're fresh. Another suggestion I have is, if you have a vacuum cooler, use the vacuum cooler to cool it down faster and to refrigerate it before you can cut it. You know, you need some form of starch retrogradation in there before you slice gluten-free buns.
I was thinking just putting fans all along the cooler.
No, it's not gonna work. Yeah, no, gluten-free is a whole different animal altogether.
Now, if it's not just when it's fresh, if it stays too wet for several days, then it's likely needs more bake out, and that may mean lowering the temperature either at the beginning or partway through and baking longer, because just the way the different starches in gluten-free react very differently. It's not like wheat starch. Even if you do a full gluten hamburger bun and take a portion of the wheat flour out and add potato starch, you will get a gummy, sticky bun for a couple of days before it starts to retrograde enough that it is a really nice, moist potato bun, so to speak, right? But the first 2 days, it's usually terrible.
Is there a reality where there is too much water hydration?
It's tricky with gluten-free, because with gluten-free, you tend to not, a lot of them tend to be more like batter than dough.
Right.
So, and you need that hydration. So you have to evaporate a lot of that water off, not just bind it by starch, right?
Right.
So otherwise the starch is making a pudding inside the crust, right?
Right. Depends on size of your batch.
Yeah, it depends on the on your dough temp too. I usually won't want to see anything above 15 minutes. Yeah, from beginning to end of batch. If it gets above 15 minutes, then you're gonna have a huge difference between the beginning of dough and end of dough.
And am I correct? If it's above 15, just try decreasing your dough size.
Oh, no, actually, you can actually do above 15 if you keep your dough temperatures really low.
Sure.
That's the only way that I've seen that you can process doughs in large sizes.
Yeah. If you're also just thinking of speeding up your cuts per minute, also think of your bagging process, and if the baggers can keep up, and if the robots and or humans can keep up, just from personal experience.
Right. Human livable temperature. Like, don't be making your mixer operator sweat temperature.
But it adds extra salt to the dough.
Gideon, what do you think?
I mean, if your company has the capital to do it, then yes, by all means, get it controlled. Whatever you set your house to, I guess. But the reality is, like, you're gonna have to think about like the energy being put in, the like square foot that you're wanting to temperature controlled. So like there's a lot of aspects that you really have to think about, like if that's like a viable option for you. I'm telling you, like, if there is an option, then yeah, like sure, 75, 80, 85. I don't know, make it nice, make it like Puerto Rico or
Well, I've been in situations where it's impossible to get the temperature down to below 100. Sometimes people work in 100, and I'm like, the best thing you can do in that situation is put an air conditioner right at where the mixer operator is, regardless, because sometimes it's just not possible to cordon off or put a wall between the proofer and the oven. I mean, your problem is the oven. The oven is heating up the entire facility, right? If you're going to be building plants, make sure the oven is like in the center, away from the cooling side of things and away from the mixing side of things. You actually can put the proofer and oven in the same room.
The age of the facility. I mean, some of the older facilities, they functioned okay as originally designed, and working conditions were not scrutinized as much as they are today. And then they expanded and grew, and they put in bigger ovens and bigger proofers and everything else, but they didn't upgrade anything else. And that is where the problems usually start. I've seen situations where some bakeries were sued by the workers
by the union,
because of working conditions, and because people got very sick, right? And so it comes down to that the owner operators need to ensure that they do everything with a big picture in mind, so that, like as Dr. Lin says, so that you can get some separation walls in between, because you're not going to cool down the oven zone. I mean, that you can ventilate that as best as you can, but you're not going to get that down to 80 degrees. But you where the workup zone, makeup zone is and stuff, where people are mixing the doughs and processing and things like that, it's also much better for the product in the long run, right? I mean, if the whole area is in a little bit better air conditioned type of condition, and especially when you're packaging. I mean, if everything comes out of the cooler and the packing room's 110 degrees, you wasted your money on the cooler, right?
Yeah. Well, I want to respect everyone's time. That was the last question, but our forums on LinkedIn and Facebook and BAKERpedia.com are always open. Dr. Lin and Mark, thank you so much for your time. And also thank you, Top Taste, for sponsoring this presentation. And go to their website, contact them, get your Top Taste crispy onions, download the hamburger bun baker paper for more info, and link is in the chat box. Everyone, thank you so much. And to bakers, happy baking.